So Refresh Miami, guys. And this event is being live streamed thanks to Richard. Richard, you want to raise your hand? And Richard's at the back. He's streaming this on his website, ArtsAndCultureTv.com, right? And the URL is at the bottom, which is a crazy, easy to read bit.ly URL, you know. So, all right. So, Jose, you want to talk about Lead 305?
Hey, look, it's amazing to sit here and see everybody in the audience. The energy, the vibrancy, the brain power that exists in this room is really, really cool. And I really want to thank Brian, Mark for making Lead 305 a part of this. And I want to thank all of you for showing everybody who asked a question about entrepreneurship and its viability here in South Florida up. Right? We're here to stay. We're not arriving, we've arrived. We've landed, okay? Lead 305, you could follow the conversation at Lead 305 on Twitter. You can go to lead305.org. The website is a work in process for those of you who see it. But really what Lead 305 is it's a bridge between the current established leadership base and folks like us in the room. Folks that are a part of a lot of these conversations, and as the leadership base talks about the next 15 to 20 years and aren't going to be around to actualize it, we're there making sure that our voice is heard, making sure that our vision is there. It's not next in line. It's not the aspiring. It's us, the ones who've landed, the ones who are making it. They talk about job growth. Every single person in this room with a little bit of luck and a lot of success is going to have a lot of employees under their belt. How do you create jobs? You're right here. You're right here. The Beacon Council has one community, one goal. There's all kinds of these established leadership organizations throwing millions of dollars at the problem, trying to figure it out, and we're here. So what's Lead 305? We put together some events. We come up with ideas, and it's all organic. When I say we, who's Lead 305? You're Lead 305, and you're Lead 305. Okay, Lead 305 is us. We're the leaders of this community coming together and having a united voice. It's an open source leadership platform for us to go ahead and take this thing by the horn and say, look, this is some of the ideas we have. A couple of the things that we've come up with, one of the ideas is to have something called Tourist in Your Own Backyard. We're gonna pick a couple of places locally, like Little Havana's a great example. When's the last time anybody here walked the streets of Little Havana? I grew up here. If you go there today, the rent is tripling. The businesses that are going in there are really, really strong. Why? Because they're booming, and across the street, they've got, the city center coming up. We should know about that. If we're looking at being at somewhere that's going to be vibrant and whatnot, regardless of what your business is, you should do it. So how do you do it? Well, somebody in the room, the last time I mentioned this, said, look, I'm in. You've got connections. You know 3 business owners or the 3 of the biggest businesses in that little strip. I'll make the connection. All of a sudden, we're going to have a speaker come out, give us a little history of Little Havana. We're going to walk through, one of the luxury dealerships there. Navarro that was there. They're going to show us some of whatnot. And as we come together, we'll start to really appreciate what's in the area. You have a tech company that's something about fashion that has something to do with whatnot. You come to that event and you're a part of the conversation. Take from it what you want. Set your mark. So I want to thank you guys for being here. We're also putting together an entrepreneurial conference here soon called Tech Fight, TEKFIGHT. Should be really cool. You'll start to see a lot about that, and thank you again at Lead 305.
So I want to thank all our sponsors tonight, especially the MBA Programs Entrepreneurship Club for co-hosting this with us. Without them, you wouldn't have free booze and free food tonight. So let's give them a warm round of applause. And some of our other sponsors tonight, LiveNinja.com. Will is somewhere in the room, right? They're actually looking for a PHP developer. So if you know anyone who is looking for a job, LiveNinja has funding and is a fast and quickly growing company. Rocker Labs, who one of our panelists is works there, and a bunch of their employees are here. So they provided all our cupcakes along with Misha's sponsoring. So thank them for the cupcakes. Rocker Labs, everybody. And also pigflare.com, which Matt Lally is not here, but he sponsored it in kind. You can check out seekingcofounder.com, which is the special site that he set up for tonight's event for everybody to check out his site, Pigflare. So I'd like to bring our speakers up on stage. You guys want to come up? Or are you, it's just going to be me talking for... all right. Come on up. So why don't you guys go down the line and introduce yourselves, because I don't want to butcher anything. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. My name is Steve Rapetti. I own a technology company in Fort Lauderdale. I also own a technology investment fund, and I do a fair amount of these things. In fact, there's folks out here that I recognize, been to our place, and we've done some investments with. I'm a tech guy. I'm a geek. I like to code. I love to code. I also like to invest in the next thing, and I think that potentially the next greatest thing is right in this room here, and I'm blown away by the number of folks that are here, and I'm really excited to see what happens. So,
Cool.
I'm Ed Toro. I'm currently working at a startup in Aventura called inversiones.com. I've worked at a couple different startups in the South Florida area. I think this is my 4th overall. I'm really a tech guy. He's actually one of the business guys.
no, techie.
I've been going to events in South Florida with Brian for probably 6 or 7 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
I was the curator of the calendar at MiamiTechEvents.com. I'm also posting a lot of events at MiamiTech.org, so if anyone's interested in finding out other stuff that's going on in South Florida, check it out. And I'm just kind of a startup guy, I guess, from a tech perspective. I'm a developer, I'm a coder.
Cool. Can you guys all hear back in the back?
Do I need to get closer?
Yeah? Cool. All right.
Can you repeat all that? My name is Stuart Davis. I'm actually a physician by background, and I consider myself a medical entrepreneur. I've founded or co-founded now 6 medical startups, mostly in the field of medical devices. A few of them have already had successful exits, either being sold to larger strategics, or actually I took one of the companies public back in 2007 here in Miami. And then I'm also an angel investor in medical device companies, and have a venture capital fund investing in medical and medical IT related technology here in South Florida area as well.
My name is Charles. I'm with Rocker. I basically started out probably in high school with one of my best friends from high school. We started our own platform to prototype applications faster, because we thought it took too long to build products. We got acquired probably 2 years after that. And then ever since then, I've been working with Decipher Labs, who then merged with Rocker. So we became Rocker Labs. So we're the official innovation lab for DDB, one of the largest marketing companies in the world. And by heart, we're an R&D company. We just like to build products that can change people's lives. It's basically what we look for. In the typical life cycle of a tech startup, you have 3 phases. The first phase, which is essentially the idea part, exciting part, where you come up with the idea, you got to validate it, and you get funding for it. The next part, where you got to build that prototype, or that what we call the MVP, the minimum viable product, and take it to market, and then launch it. And then after that, we have to get the next round of funding and launch it fully, actually build the business out. So we live right in that middle part, where we get that validated idea and we take it to market. That's it. Cool.
So we're going to start with a couple easy questions, hopefully. So for those of you who are on primarily the business side, what kind of experiences have you guys had in finding the right fit as far as a technical partner is concerned? We'll just dive right in. Steve, you want to start? I mean, I know you're on both sides, but
Sure.
You're also the closest to me, so
Yeah.
physically right here. I mean, not emotionally. Sorry, Steve.
Hi, honey. What was the question? No. So one of the things that you run into is, how many companies can you run? How many great ideas can you simultaneously process? And that becomes an issue of scalability. What's my capacity threshold to be able to do deals, whether it's from a tech side or from a business side? And so one of the things that we look for is how can you replicate that success? Because again, you can only run so many companies in all of this. So what's really interesting is if you can find talent and energy and passion and great ideas that have great business opportunities, those are good too. But fundamentally, if we can find that passion and that talent, that what they really need is some assistance, some money or some technology or just some support. All of a sudden, those then become opportunities that ultimately become companies, and hopefully companies that are successful. And for those folks out here that are on the technology side, whether it is additional technology or it's capital or mentoring that you need, or if you're on the business side and you've got this great business idea but you don't have an execution strategy, and again I'm assuming the technology space, then being able to align yourself with strong technology partners also can facilitate that process. So the things that we look for on our end are again, those people with great ideas or great talent on the tech side that just need some additional assistance. And I have no idea if I hit your question.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else want to tackle that question?
I think I also sort of will build on what he said. I think it's a coming together of sort of three things when I'm putting together maybe a new company or looking how to form. You want somebody who really can be, you have your tech person, whether it's your, who's designing applications, whatever it is, or my business that, is going to really work on designing the prototypes or, developing the actual device, let's say. But you also need the person who is going to sort of operate and take care of running the company on a day-to-day basis and help with that, because usually that's not the same person. And then usually there's a third person, or it could be one of those other two, who's going to be sort of the face of the company, maybe raising, and the one who's going to be raising money or maybe has some of the credibility. So you can have a team that sort of, shares those responsibilities, but usually there's going to be one person that's more focused in each one of those areas. I think works out the best, and that's been, pretty successful for me, at least over the last, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Same here.
Cool. So from the opposite side of the table, though, huh?
So out of those three, which one of those three are each of you for?
Huh?
He just described three people. Describe yourself.
So I've played 2 of the 3 roles. I've been the sort of the day-to-day operator of the company, but I've also played the role of the face of the company and the money raiser of the company. I'm usually not I'm not the idea guy. I'm not, I'm usually looking for those people separately in different areas.
Each person?
Yeah.
All right, so I handle more of the tech side. I do product development, make sure it's valid, usability, all the way from usability to the technologies we're going to use, to the architecture of the build. And out of all the developers, I'm typically the most social one, so that's why I'm out here with everyone else. So, I'm that guy.
So you said that you like when you're thinking about investing in someone's idea, for passion mostly. Of course, they have to have a good idea and they have to present something.
Well, that helps, yes.
That'll make you money. In the end, how much have you encountered anyone who's come to you with an idea and they're very passionate about it, but maybe they're a young starter and they're in college or something like that? How do you tackle those instances?
Well, honestly, I don't think age has anything to do with it. So there really is commitment, and we see 15-year-olds doing startups, which, I think that they should probably spend a little more time focused on school. But by the same token, at 15, we see people, generate $1 million. Unfortunately, it's rare. Ultimately, it's really about the fundamentals. Is it a sound business, first and foremost? And then where do you fit into that role of that? You've got this great idea, you've got this passion. Are you enough to execute on that idea, ultimately? So. You should see me afterwards. I did want to kind of respond to the question here as to where I fit in. And so I actually started my career as a technology guy, hardcore technology guy. And I will disclose my age indirectly and say that for those of you that have actually heard of Ashton Tate, I actually wrote the multi-index drivers for the original Ashton Tate DBase before it was available for DOS. So, yeah, I'm the oldest guy in the crowd. Thanks, I appreciate that. Second oldest, maybe. We're in the same plan. And I was fortunate enough to evolve that into the business side. And I was very fortunate to get active on the investment side of it as well. And as far as the idea side, I actually do hold patents, which is a little weird because I'm also a member of the Open Web Foundation, which is an anti-patent group. Trust me, those meetings are kind of interesting. So,
So, do you guys want questions from the audience sprinkled throughout, or do you want me to just barrage you with questions and then we turn to audience questions after?
your gig, dude.
Yeah, but you guys are the victims here.
Oh, whatever you want.
All right,
It's
so,
gonna hurt other ways.
well, I guess, so my next question, though, is probably one that hits close to home to a lot of people here. So what red flags do you guys see? Like, what immediately stands out to you when someone approaches you to do business with them or to join their startup, or, you know, or when you're trying to get them to join your startup? Ed, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll go first so I don't get drowned out here. So a lot of the red flags that I have when I'm being approached by a potential business partner who wants me to be a tech co-founder are more based on my personality. So I don't know if it's universal to all tech guys, but one of my pet peeves is just the acronym CTO itself. If someone is offering to name me the CTO of their startup, that indicates to me that they're coming from more of a corporate culture than a startup culture. I think a startup culture prefers the term tech co-founder, and I see too often people creating startups want to name themselves CEOs, which I don't think is appropriate until like you're paying yourself a CEO's salary. And along those same lines as culture, business suits are usually a turnoff. No offense. But that seems to indicate to me, okay, this guy's coming from more of a big company, corporate background, big money, and not the kind of smaller development-oriented or lean startup-oriented culture that I'm used to. So I would consider that a red flag. A lot of times just the tone of the conversation that I have with a business partner can be a turnoff. A lot of times, unfortunately, people don't really have good mental analogies for how to have these kind of discussions. So they'll approach me as if they are an employer looking for an employee and kind of establish that as the context rather than approaching me as a potential business partner. And coming at me in that kind of tone and that kind of context makes me think that why would I want to be a partner with you when it's clear that the only kind of relationship you want is a more hierarchical, you're the boss and I'm just an employee type of relationship. It's hard to say specifically what's the right and wrong thing to say, but it's just something to keep in mind that you want to approach a tech co-founder as if they were a business partner and not just some guy you're hiring to write some code for you. Another bad sign, and I can probably go on for a while, so I'll just stop right here.
Doing great.
Is whenever I'm talking to a business co-founder and they don't know what a tech co-founder does, so they don't know what the technology stack is. They have some guy taking care of everything for them, but they have no idea, no transparency into how that stuff works. The kind of phrases that are big turnoffs is, oh, I'm just really looking for a guy to handle all the tech stuff for me. That's a really bad sign because I get the impression that this guy has no idea what my job is, and I could come in and say, oh yeah, I'm handling all the tech stuff for you, and then take his money and not do anything. Anyone else want to jump in?
Charles, you want to
I think
chime
you
in?
pretty much nailed it. I guess to wrap it up, I think morons are a bad idea. Greedy, big ego. Typically, you find that right off the bat. A big flag for me is people asking me for money. That's typically a bad sign. And typically, you can find it out just by talking to them for the first 5 minutes. You can see how fake or how see-through they are, and you can see how they I guess value you as a person. Typically, when they come to you and they want to be like your higher up, or they just see you as this guy or gimp that they could use to do something with, that's when it's a bad sign for sure. So I think you nailed it right there.
One of you,
What about NDAs? Is that a flag for you guys?
No, NDAs are typically a bad idea. Typically what I've seen is that when they ask me for an NDA right up front, I think they're very, very sensitive to the idea, which can be a good and bad thing. It's not like, especially in Miami, no one's going to take the idea and execute it right there and then. There's a small talent pool here, although very good, very small. But if they come to you with an NDA, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure it's a mutual NDA. If it's one way and they're taking your ideas, then that's a bad sign.
I think everybody should be able to have something that they can talk about, at least initially, without an NDA. You know, and just answer his question also in the back a little bit more, and as I put my investor hat on, I think somebody needs to initially come to you. They got to have some form of a business plan. It may not need to be a thorough business plan. It may not need to be all perfected and whatnot. Some form of an investor deck. Again, it could need work, and maybe some type of at least teaser or some some type of executive summary of the business. I think that's important, so you can at least get an idea of what they're after. And I think all of that, to answer your question, should be done in a non-confidential way. And let's say if they want to go further, that's when the NDA comes out.
Yeah, I just want to add on the NDA. So from my end, in initial meetings, there's not a chance I'm going to sign an NDA. I mean, there's too many things that I look at. There are too many other things that I'm involved in. And I flat out caution people that you need to be able to convey your idea in such a way that you're not compromising, the personal information. And then if we get to the next stage, then I may consider an NDA. And clearly, if it's hardcore tech, then again, we have to get to that stage where we're willing to sit down and do that. But to flat out ask me that, I need you, I'm not even going to talk to you to an NDA, guess what? I'm not going to talk to you either. So.
Excellent.
I know Austin's views about NDAs, and I have to say that I agree with the way he feels about it. I usually find NDAs are kind of a sign of unprofessionalism, which is kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. If you're forcing me to sign an NDA, then you're afraid that your idea is so simple to implement that anyone can do it. And I'm thinking, well, then why do you need to talk to me? Go just hire some cheap offshore development shop to create it, because it seems to be so easy to implement.
Right, but quick, everybody steal that idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, in that example, is
Couldn't you try to protect it a little bit easier with
Dropbox?
cheap provisional patents and stuff before you talk to somebody? And there's ways around it.
Is it actually defensible?
Basically, people looking for investors, they're missing a lot of components, like the knowledge. Like, I had to sit here for a couple of minutes and think about, non-disclosure agreement. Like, that came to me after the end, after y'all started. Like, there's some components missing for the people who, has the ideas, of course, and need somebody else. So.
Yeah, and the trick for you is to be able to articulate that in such a way that you can get somebody excited about it. And if you're able to get them excited about it, then you can talk about NDAs at that point. But it's just not likely that people are going to come up and just say, oh, I have no idea what you want to talk to me about, but I'll go ahead and sign an NDA. Because from my end, if I'm already in a deal that happens to have some association, by signing that NDA, I guarantee I'm going to get dragged into court. So as a consequence, it's on you to be able to articulate that. And the other question is what you're doing, that idea, is it actually defensible? And what actions, as Stuart was saying, what are the things that you need to make sure that you protect that idea? Because we're not suggesting that you compromise your idea. But to convey it, there has to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah, I'll admit that I've probably signed some NDAs knowing full well that the guy wasn't going to enforce it in any way. He wasn't capable of doing it. So in that case, I might sign an NDA. But I think
Those were awesome tweets, by the way, Ed. I remember that.
No
day.
problem.
That algorithm you shared was priceless.
One-liner. Yeah. Fantastic. I think the idea, the point that he made earlier about how, as an investor, he doesn't want to sign an NDA because he hears so many ideas and it's too much of a risk. Tech co-founders should be pitched to as if they are investors, because I'm constantly hearing ideas from other people with business plans who want to be business partners. And you're asking me to invest my time potentially at a lower salary, a lower rate of pay. That's like me giving you money. That's me being kind of an angel investor. So it's just as much of a risk of me as an investor of my time and efforts as it is for an investor who's investing actual money in terms of signing NDAs.
Question.
All right.
Yeah, Mark Circle. I'm blown away right now because you mentioned you've seen a lot of faces in here before. This is my first time ever coming to one of these, so it's amazing, especially hearing from the self-prophesized true tech.
Well, I give him props now.
Yeah. No problem. exactly you guys are looking for, which, coming into this thing, I'm thinking, okay, these guys are going to be looking for ideas, you're going to be looking for, front of the line technology, but, a lot of things that you mentioned, which I find impressive because I have a sales background, is you mentioned the person's approach, the person's look, the person's tone.
Right.
You didn't mention anything about an idea or anything like that. So, and then the other four of you guys kind of piggybacked off that. Nobody at this point has mentioned, oh, they're looking for the next great idea. So it's almost like the idea is almost not going to be seen unless you can make the right approach, which is probably why a lot of people, it takes 4, 5, 6 times before they meet someone that maybe has their
vision.
the same type of personality that they can connect, and then they can finally get to the idea. So here's my question.
All right.
So when someone comes to you and you like the way they dress, wow, you like the tone of voice,
Okay.
you like their approach. They don't try to treat you like big time. You're going to be their next employee, and you like what they do. Okay, at that point, when you say, hey, okay, I like you as a person. I like your idea. I want to take a look at this. Maybe let's sign an NDA and go to the next step. What portion of control do you guys want to keep on the business plan, or do you want to just throw money at the idea and say, hey, go with it, and then we're going to control and we're going to take a certain margin of the profits or whatever. But so my question is, after we get to the point where we can do business, how much control are you guys going to keep on the project, and how much are you going to want to delegate responsibilities to, and how much are you going to let the person that looks good, has a good tone, that you like, take the idea, and how much how much control are you going to give that?
Can I actually answer this? So, I think part of the point that underlying to what you're saying is, a lot of this is more about the relationship, because you're basically marrying this person. So you want to be able to get along well with them and understand them, and you also have to understand that many of these ideas shift. There's pivots constantly, and so if the person is too married to this idea of, let's say, Groupons for dogs or something, paired with a social network for cats, whatever. That's not the point. But the point is that if they're so married to this idea that they haven't done, that they're not willing to accept outside sort of feedback, then that's sort of a red flag that a lot of the technical or the business side needs to take into account. So I think more importantly, it has to be that your new partner has to be willing to accept your feedback and digest it and process it, rather than sort of, all right, this is my idea, I'm so focused, I'm not going to listen to any outside influence or factors, that regardless of what my technical co-founder says, I'm going to continue on with this idea. Does that at all sort of address what you're looking for?
Yeah.
About
yeah.
the what? Oh,
Yeah,
right. Of course they have to be appealing in their dress and attire. I mean, otherwise you can't be seen in public with them. I mean, that would just be embarrassing.
That's why I wore the suit.
Right.
So, Mark, I had an opportunity to talk to you before, and interesting question, ultimately. And, I apologize if we somehow made it that it was about dress or otherwise. It's always about the deal, and each deal is unique. So the need, the offer, the accept is all unique in all of that stuff. And fundamentally, is it a sound business? So from that idea, because ideas are great, but ideas aren't companies. Is that idea capable of generating a real company? And so that's the first question that we're interested in. Now, depending upon what you're looking for, if you're looking for money, if you're looking for technology help, if you're looking for a special hire, whatever that unique aspect is, there's some relationship that exists of, here's what I'm doing, here's what I have available that I'm willing to provide, and here's what I need back. And again, that's always unique in all of that. But above all of that, and it's not dress, it's the deal. It's that idea. Is this a real business? So, and I can't ever think of actually someone showing up at my door and me saying, nope, you're not dressed right, and I close the door. I can't. Right. But this is the real world, and you wonder that if someone is not able to articulate their idea, is that a larger issue? And that's got nothing to do with dress. but it's overall how people carry themselves, how they feel passionate about what they're doing, and I hope that helps.
Yeah, you have to believe in that person that they're going to take your money and be able to execute. And if you don't, then it doesn't matter. They could have the greatest idea in the world. If you don't think they can execute, or you don't think you can then bring in enough other talent to surround their brilliant tech mind, let's say, with somebody else who can help them execute, then you're not going to be able to invest in them. I think that's a very important component, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I just want to sum it up, but for me, ideas are really worthless. I don't know how many times I've been approached by people who have ideas for companies, thinking that the idea itself is valuable, looking around for people to buy their idea in order to go and implement it. The startup world doesn't work that way. You could have had the idea for Twitter before Twitter, but if you didn't execute on it, it doesn't matter. And I've seen in more than one case, someone will come up to me and have an idea for a recommendation system for restaurants. And then a couple months later, someone at TechCrunch, Disrupt, or some big conference actually produces a product that's a recommendation system for restaurants. The person who had that idea first doesn't get any special prize for having had that idea. Well, if you've patented that concept, that's different, right? It's all about the capability to execute on it. And part of that, evaluating someone's capability of executing it, is looking at a lot of the intangibles, such as the way they present themselves, the way they do their pitch, and aspects of the business plan, how much momentum, how much traction, how serious they are about it. And then before I start, there was an interesting point that I just wanted to echo of yours about loss of control. How much control you're willing to give up to individuals, which seemed like more of a business question than a technology question. Because when I get into these kinds of relationships, I'm assuming the business guy is going to handle all the businessy stuff, and I'm violating my rules right there. So I'm hoping that maybe these guys will answer the how much control you're willing to give up to in terms of strategy and product when you get into these types of partnerships.
Just real quick comment on what you said, because you lost me when you said ideas are worthless. However, you brought me full back around when you said ideas without execution are worthless.
Right.
And that one I agree with. So.
Okay. We're good.
There was a question in the back, standing up.
My partner and I have an idea which actually is in testing web software product. And right now, I feel we're in a critical phase, or at least I'm not. It's schizophrenic about that. I'm between do you want to release it like Steve Jobs and just say it has to be every single piece of it has to be perfect, and or we don't release and have developers, leave you, you're so demanding, or do you just get it out there? And I think as my development partner, he wants to get it out there, get Dave known, and I'm kind of the hold back and make it perfect. But I know that's not always, you can't be too extreme on the other side as well. I know you've seen a lot of companies crash and burn, and you've seen some succeed by having some certain ingredients, some certain sets of standards for their software before they released it, and they made it available to Yelp and somebody say, hey, this sucks, give it one rating. So from that, where you've seen companies get ready to release and you've seen the mistakes and failures, I'd like just to hear your comments about what are maybe some key elements to keep in mind as we're launching our product.
Personally, I'm with your partner in launching it. That's like the best part of running a company, a startup especially. But ultimately, I think you're the best person to decide when to launch it or not to. Everyone knows that perfect is the enemy of great. So if it's great, it's good enough, get it out. If you think it's good enough or you want to get another round of funding and don't take it out yet, you could do that approach, for example. But ultimately, I think if you believe in your product the most and you think it's going to do well and you've gotten to this point by yourselves, it's your baby. You decide if you're going to launch it or not. That's my thought.
I think what I want to add, though, is like if let's say you're looking at 10 features that you want to launch with, that you're waiting for all 10 to be perfect, but if you have 7 that are perfect now, launch with those 7 because no one knows about those other 3 that are missing. So you want to launch with something that's good, that's going to get good feedback, but it doesn't have to be the end product that you're eventually going to launch with, that you want as your final product down the road, because 99% of the people outside of your office aren't going to know that there was 3 features missing that you didn't get time to finish before your launch date. So focus on doing what you can well and launch with what you can. Does that make sense?
So it's always different for the product, because obviously if you don't release enough components for the market, then you're going to get eaten alive out there. On the other hand, if you wait for everything to be completed and every feature that you think without actually getting verification from the market, then you're never going to launch, or you're going to launch too late. And to quote Paul Graham, release early, release often.
Yeah, I also think the comparison to Apple is wrong if you're comparing hardware and software, because if you release hardware that's got a bunch of bugs in it, then it's kind of hard to release a fix. In the software culture, the idea is release early, release often, because you can be fixing it while it's out there. So you can be both validating that your customers actually enjoy the idea of the concept, and potentially even get them involved in telling you what things they think should be fixed and what things shouldn't. It's always a mistake, and this is the enemy of a lot of different projects that I've worked on, to spend a lot of time wondering if this font or this color or this feature or this design or this whatever is perfect enough to release. If something works and someone really wants that thing to work, it almost doesn't even matter whether or not it's nice, because if I think the Wedwoo example they've presented at some other events, I think the first version of their product was purposely incredibly ugly, just to see whether or not people would be so excited by the concept that they would sign up anyway and decide to use the product. That's a really interesting customer validation, and you can start getting some of that information early on, rather than hoping that your customers are patient enough to wait for the golden final product.
You can also get customer validation through things like private beta, where you have a specific set of customers, release it out there incrementally, don't expose it to the world, and then get their feedback and gain incremental comfort for yourselves to be able to launch it large. Awesome. I have lots to say, but I'm gonna back off for a minute.
I think for us,
subject.
it's really been finding solid talent that we can work with that has a good understanding of technology and that can come in and really contribute right off the bat. The way our culture works is we're very hands-on hackers, I guess. I don't like to use the term, but we're really hands-on. We start getting to work right away. And in our case, we work in pairs. So all our developers is one computer, two pairs, or excuse me, two people. So for us, it's always been that core component. And we think what drives a great company, a great idea, a great product is the team behind it. And we invest a lot more into that than anything else. I think for us, that's been our biggest struggle, which is why we built some of our apps to help us find more people. But I think with that in general, with locally, we've been successful with local events like this, like Refresh, for example. We get people from all walks of life from everywhere say, hey, I just met you here. Can we hang out? And the local schools, FIU, UM, kind of reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're looking for young guys that are smart. They don't have to have the core skill set, but they have to have the right attitude, the right kind of approach to problems, willing to be ambitious and go after it. And then yes, those are so much better to work with.
I also like people replace their blood with Red Bull.
We have a couple of those guys too. And we have a vending machine outside in case they run out. But yeah, I think that's our core struggle.
I just had a comment just for the thing you just said. You're saying that you like to go into different university systems and see the talent that's there. It's interesting because my company is Labor Broker. I just started it, and I'm actually
Labor buffer?
Excellent.
What did you say?
Labor.
Time is always an issue. So going into universities for businesses, I understand that it's, it takes time. And basically, the company, our, labor buffer is, we go into universities for you, and we get those students, and we help, we help you test their skills, and they get the right experience while getting paid. So, that's just a comment.
That was a pitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Elevator pitch.
I think the question about challenges in the South Florida technology scene is something that people have been discussing online for years. If you, I don't know if is Austin still around, but he's been writing about it. It's talked about in the Miami Herald a lot, and the Starting Gate blog. It's talked about on Quora a lot. I have a couple of answers on Quora responding to issues like that. There's a lot of different issues you could potentially have. I think if I would pick one, I think it's a mistake to try to take the Silicon Valley or the New York Silicon Alley culture, the way that they go about doing things, and assume that that's the way things should work in South Florida. There are successful startup companies down there, and almost invariably they don't take what is considered a traditional investment route, a traditional product development route, traditional office space route. It's always our own style, and we're still trying to kind of figure out what that template is, but learn from the companies that have been successful around here and figure out how they did it, whether it's by bootstrapping or finding those super secret angels that are hanging around here that are not necessarily part of more traditional venture capital organizations, knowing what kind of markets to target. Like if you're targeting Latin America, for example, in some way, this is a good place to be in, and the culture in California and New York isn't going to tell you the best way to target those kind of markets. Just look around. Find me afterwards, and I'll give you a bunch of links so that since you've just moved into town, we probably have no one sent you the ambassador's guide yet with the links to all of the refresh and events listings and Quora pages and all of that.
You didn't get Ed's gift basket?
Yeah, that's right. Every new person that comes moves into South Florida from outside gets the email gift basket. So let me know.
So, yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there's definitely still a problem here with access to capital in South Florida. I mean, I don't see that changing for a good period of time still. But looking for, talking to people that have been successful and have raised money, maybe some of these non-traditional routes. These are the people that you got to start networking with and see what they did, because there's not 16,000 angel groups out here like there are in the Bay Area and Palo Alto. You got to figure out who those groups are, who are the ones that are actually investing in what you're doing. And there are a lot of these so-called secret angels and these people that are, they are there investing, but their name is not all over the place. You have to talk to somebody who got an investment from this person and get introductions and things like that. There is a lot of money down here. Unfortunately, a lot of it wasn't made in the tech space. So, these people are sometimes more leery, but there's plenty of people who made money in other spaces, such as real estate development and things like that down here, other tourism-related ventures and things like that, that are willing to try their luck now in the tech space. And, I'm happy to share some of those names as well, just like he is, and they're around. They're just harder to find here than they are in the Bay Area. There's no question.
Steve?
Yeah, I just want to kind of add, because I concur with everything that all of you guys are saying on this, but I also want to happily state that we're seeing some significant changes. It wasn't that long ago that if an entrepreneur, regardless of where they were, including Miami or Fort Lauderdale, South Florida, had some kind of a tech idea, that he would start that process, but his goal was to move to Silicon Valley. And likewise, the money, it was implied that it came from Silicon Valley. Now, I live in South Florida, but yes, I have lawyers in Silicon Valley. I sit on a nonprofit in Silicon Valley. I have marketing firms in Silicon Valley. And I woke up one day and said, but I live in Florida. It has never been cheaper or easier to create a startup than it is right this second. Virtual offices, inexpensive space, resources, all of those things are available today, so it geographically does not matter. So one of the things that we did is we made a concerted effort to look at our backyard, which is why I'm here. And I suspect, why you guys are here as well. We're interested in this market. We're interested in this effort. And you don't have to graduate and go to Silicon Valley to be successful. It can happen right from here or right from wherever you are or wherever you came from. And I'll tell you, it's about relationships. And this is what it's about right here. Because it's this thing that makes you aware of the guy or girl next to you that may be in your next startup, or that may have a referral or the next resource, or it's guys like right here, or I see Alex over there doing crazy stuff that helps the entrepreneur community. And if you reach any element of success, it is incumbent on you to then reach back down and help as well. And I think that we're seeing both with the money. One of the things that we do is, and where's Lou? Right there. So one of the things that we do is we have what we call our Godfather Day, and once a month, anybody can get an hour of our time, and the only promise you're going to get is an hour. And we may laugh at you, but we'll talk. Because it's too easy for investors to say no. But if you actually get engaged and understand, it may not be this deal. It may be the next deal, or it may be the resource, the talent that we see. And then to go along with that, the investor, we have our Godfather Gathering. And that's when, again, roughly once a month, these secret angel investors that are trying not to be secret, and other folks, and Miami Innovation Fund, and New World Angels, and lots of other successful entrepreneurs are actively getting together to try and understand how to help in this market better. Because sitting in this room is the next Facebook or its equivalent. Let's not go out at a $38 valuation, $38 share price, but sorry.
Let's say when you're hiring somebody or when you're getting a tech partner, so how do you differentiate? Let's say the person doesn't have previous experience, for startups. How do you differentiate people who belong in startups compared to people who belong in traditional businesses? Because you don't want to make the worst thing is to make a bad hire, and you're just going to waste a lot of money and whatever, and time and energy.
When we interview, and this is talking to tech people that we're going to hire, right? Just to make sure. When we interview, typically there's the interview process that we go through, and usually between those meetings, we figure out if they're a good fit or not, and make that kind of decision. But if it's a little bit harder, we go even further and we do trial periods. So we'll actually bring in the person and start programming with one of our guys in pairs. If we see issues, he gets switched out to another pair to see if it's the pair or if it's him. And if he fails 2 or 3 times, then that's when we decide that he's not for us. But typically for us, we put the faith on the person right away. We're a culture that we feed you the rope to kind of make yourself successful, and we let you decide whether you're going to do something about it or you're going to hang yourself. So that's our approach when we hire developers.
You can't figure it out from the interviews at all. It's nothing.
We do typically. We should be able to, but
How do you do that?
talking to them. I mean, we have tests, of course, right, to make sure that the skill set's there, or even the aptitude. Hey, are you a critical thinker, for example? How would you break down this problem? So we do that piece. But sometimes some guys slip through the cracks through the interview process, and then you have to actually work with them. And sometimes when you work with them is when you find out where his true colors lie. He likes to be a cowboy, for example, so he doesn't work well with others. Or maybe he doesn't know how to he's not confident in himself to make decisions, so you can't leave him alone too much. You have to be with him. So you figure out as you work with him, and typically you can weed them out usually in the interview process.
And you're going to make mistakes. I mean, I've hired and fired hundreds of people. I'm still making mistakes on it. You can't get everything out of them in an interview. You don't know. I mean, people know how to interview. There's no question about that.
I think the question that you had that kind of made a distinction between people who are more appropriate for big business or people who are more appropriate for startups was kind of a false dichotomy. I think the points that he was making about people who are just good to work with or not good to work with is kind of the question that you want answered. Because really in a startup environment, it's a lot more accepting for people who are a little bit weird or quirky that might not work out well in a corporate environment. The other way around isn't at all the case. It might be really hard. I mean, personally, I find it hard sometimes to put myself into big corporate environments after having experience in a startup dealing with bureaucracy and politics and all these other things. But if it's not a culture question, if it's a code quality question, if it's a code skills question, I think it's really important for business co-founders to know what quality looks like. Too much they're kind of trusting on portfolios or promises or resumes, but to actually get a sample of code, and even if you really don't understand what's going on there, to know what good code looks like. It's got comments, the functions are small. a lot of the lessons in software craftsmanship about testing and what's appropriate architectures and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that you can identify, like code smells, without needing a computer science degree. I recommend that any business person looking for a tech co-founder learn a little bit about code, learn how to code. There's lots of really great resources like Code School and Code Academy and Rails for Zombies and learn Python the hard way, where you can go in and learn what code looks like, what good code looks like, what good practices are, without having to know how to write code. That knowledge is invaluable when coming from a non-tech perspective and trying to figure out whether or not someone is legit.
I think that really shows that you care from a business side.
Right.
If you're actually involved in our side and understand a little bit more, I think that that's a great indicator for the opposite of the bad indicator.
Green flag.
You're like, hey, this guy is a perfect guy to work with because he's willing to step out of his comfort zone and get him to learn a little bit more about what you're doing, so he knows what he's talking about when he's talking to other people. And I think that's huge for us too.
You know, just to add, in corporate America, it's easy to be a bad coder and hide. In the startup arena, you're going to be unmasked unmercifully very, very quickly. And so what you do want to try and do is, and I concur literally with everything you guys said, is you want to try and mitigate that pain as early on as you can. So the more you understand. Now, one of the questions, the question that you had in all of that was, okay, so if you don't have any experience, you know, how do you go forward with all this? The first question you have to ask yourself is, you know, what do you want to do? And then you got to apply that crazy thing called a reality check to that and see if that actually makes sense. And then see if you can get that passion to go over to the next person, to believe in you, to support that. And then these startup things have a crazy way of you know, sort of checking themselves on an ongoing basis, or they fail. So be open and real. So.
Raul has had his hand up for like 12 minutes.
One comment, actually. You know, this has been built on real estate. So all the wealth here in South Florida is real estate speculation. Now, how do we turn this?
Mostly.
Mostly. How do we turn this into a tech community? And I think that one of the things, you know, people mentioned FSU and UM, but what about high schools and junior highs? What about getting a program where instead of just teaching them Java or C or something, teaching them how to find the problem that they see and come up with a solution for it, whether it's mobile or web or a combination of both, and have them work on that.
Raul, are you volunteering to teach
this?
this?
Because otherwise, you say, hey, you know, I'm smart enough to go to Palo Alto. Then you go to school there, MIT, and then I'll go to Palo Alto. You know, why do I want to stay here? But if as your adolescence goes on, you know, I often ask people, where are you from? Well, I lived here, I lived there. But I say, where were you from the ages of 13 and 17? And that's where you're from. Because that's where you become a person. And if you're at 13 and 17, what is that? High school, right? Junior high school. So I think high school is where we need to invest and, you know, inject these energies into those programs.
So Raul, we're tasking you with coming up with this curriculum. And once you have the curriculum, we will do what we can to put you in front of the school board. How about that? All right?
Very well.
Everyone heard this. Raul volunteered, right? All right.
He's doing commitment in front of everybody.
Yes. So actually, Brian, you had your hand up for a while.
Let's go to Brian to start with, so we can kind of tie all these things together. How about a few success stories from South Florida in the last couple of years, and what type of founders they had, how they got money or didn't, and how they talked to guys like Steve or Ed or any of the other panelists, and how they made that introduction.
You're asking me?
Yeah, well, do we have any success stories from the last couple of years?
I'm sure they exist. There's a handful of companies that I know of that have raised a lot of money and have built technologically complex startups, but I think the panelists could probably answer that.
So for what we do, we do kind of invest into companies by giving our insight, our technical expertise, our manpower, essentially. And one of them were actually born and grown right out of the Launchpad. It's called AdMobilize. It's run with Rodolfo Sockelman. He started originally with My Therapy Journal with his brother. They came, great story. This is a guy, he's a super passionate guy. If If he wanted to, he could run through walls. And it was the kind of guy that when we met him, we wanted to work with him, we wanted to be partners with him. He started with My Therapy Journal out of here. It was a good success in the sense that it's in the black as far as revenues are concerned. He was featured in Shark Tank. And I think 2 of the panelists wanted 50% for a certain investment because they were landing a deal with State Farm. And apparently that went well. He got bored, he wanted to do the next thing, and he built AdMobilize. I can't tell you too much, we're launching in about 2 months, but he's also won funding as well. VCs backed him up, saying, hey, we saw what you did previously, we're excited about what you're doing. And just like we did when me and my partner started, when we were right out of high school, we had our choice to go to San Fran or stay here, just like what he was suggesting earlier. We decided to stay here. Rodolfo did the same thing. I have the money. You guys, we have a team here. There's a tech environment here. There's a tech community here. So he stayed here. So we're working together. We're launching October 2012 this year. So there's one. And I'll let you guys go with whatever more.
There's certainly a number of successful local startup stories. I see Flomio is in the crowd as well. I know Open English raised, 43 million recently.
Yeah.
If you go to like Quora.com/SoFloss startups or some other like AngelList, every single startup that you see on there has a story. Some of them are still around, some of them aren't, but the ones that are all people that you can talk to and find out what that story is. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but in terms of the startups that I had worked, the way that they found me, the very first startup was through just a recruiting agency. The second startup I actually found online because that's when I moved to South Florida and found the early version of the Refresh Miami site and found some of the startups associated with them. The next startup I found because I had read somewhere that they won an award from the Miami Chamber of Commerce for the most innovative local technology company. So I ended up initiating a connection with them and joining that team. And with my current startup, it was all events, word of mouth, networking. Someone that I think I had met the father of the CEO at a hackathon a couple months before, had a couple of lunch meetings, everything worked out. Their timing was great, and I ended up jumping on board. So in that case, that's a lot of different, quote, success stories in terms of connecting me to a company. Not necessarily all of the companies being successful, but that's another story altogether.
The guy in the blue shirt has had his hand up. No, behind you. Sorry, with the tie.
Dark
with the tie. Go ahead. You had your hand up for like 25 minutes already. So.
My question is, how do you guys feel about being advisors as ranging from being a salary board member or, say, for instance, an actual board member, where you give feedback to startups and help them grow and not necessarily be actually active in the organization? And some of the examples you guys made, I'm the guy that's always stressed, saying I'm a CEO, we're looking for a CTO, but of course, I think I'm very smart, but a lot of times I'm wrong, and I need that advice from individuals like you to be able to answer those tough questions or to say, hey, this may be not a sound business, and here's this concept, and here's that, but maybe your research is wrong. How do you guys, I guess, pick those businesses and say, hey, I want to be an advisor, and maybe I want to be a board member.
I haven't answered. So I actually do something every week now called Open Office Hours that several people here have participated in. If you go on ohours.org/Brian Breslin, you can sign up, and I give everybody 30 minutes. You can't bullshit me, you can't waste my time, but I'll give you 30 minutes of my undivided attention. I'll give you as much feedback as I possibly can in those 30 minutes. If you need more advice or help beyond that, you can either email me or figure something out after that. But I feel that 30 minutes gives you a fair amount of feedback and constructive stuff to work with. So, and I've been doing this for 2 weeks, and I'm going to keep doing it for the next couple months. And several people in this room have already come and done the office hours with me, and I hope they've enjoyed themselves and gotten something out of it. But I don't know how the rest of these guys decide to filter their time and how much attention they give. But Steve mentioned his Godfather Hour, which I think is a great idea, because there's a lot of people pulling on, demanding time from guys like us. And so it's key for us to sort of sort of filter and allocate, like, or sort of block off a certain amount of time. But I know that most of the people here are more than happy to allocate that kind of time and give feedback to, especially to young entrepreneurs and startups. You know, I don't know, Steve, you want to?
Yeah, you know, and there's also a distinction with the level of help because, you know, it's being able to sit down with somebody. And by the way, I was following what you're doing with the open office, and as you say, from the Godfather stuff, I love it. But again, we can only look at so many deals at any given time, so there is a filter process. If you can't articulate your idea, that's a problem. You know, what are we going to do, sit across from the table each other and talk about what? You know, so the first thing is be able to articulate it. That doesn't mean you have to have every little piece laid out. And in fact, maybe what you're looking for is some guidance or at least some relevant, you know, experience that can go back and forth. Now that isn't a mentor necessarily. That's just a conversation with people that other people in this room perhaps that can help you. That's sounding those ideas out, getting feedback from people that you respect and trust, and helping that evolve your process. Now it can certainly get more formal with mentoring. And then ultimately with boards, now boards are a whole different animal at that point because now you got issues of liability and other elements. And so, you know, and we can only sit on so many boards as well. As far as filtering to get to my attention, just like what you're talking about, you know, to be able to get that, since we can only look at so many deals, if you can't articulate, it's not going to happen. So that's the first part of it. And I don't want a book. I don't want to read a 60-page business plan. So it's a little more than an elevator speech, but there's got to be some reasonable component in between.
You know what would be a useful exercise for you and any other entrepreneurs in here? Sit in front of your webcam and record like a 2-minute video, like where you talk about your startup and all that stuff, and post that publicly. You know, so that way these guys, if you email them, you include the link to the video, and they can take 2 minutes, you know, and watch the video and give you have a better understanding of what you're trying to do. And with that, I think you just won the T-shirt. Everybody okay with that? Oh, from Naples? Wait.
Oh. Okay, is it North Fort Myers, downtown?
I think he won the T-shirt. Everyone agree with that? Yeah. And he can sell it to someone else in the room if he wants to pay for gas to get back. But
I wanted to add that I think South Florida is really just dripping with free advice. Like if you're just looking for free advice, almost anyone you talk to is going to want to pontificate on how good or bad your idea is. And you just have to ask. And really you shouldn't have a problem finding people to advise you, whether officially or unofficially or whatever. You should have a problem with figuring out how to deal with conflicting information.
Yeah, Cuban people took a lot of crap. And I'm Cuban.
I think Raul's had enough to drink. All right, so we have time for one more question. Madeline's had her hand up for another 10 minutes, so.
Going back to the ideation topic, as technical wizards who are often approached by ideas, at what point is it optimal for an entrepreneur, a business-minded person to approach a good idea? Is it, hey, I have this thing and it's on a napkin? Is it, I've offshored this and I have this rough prototype? Or, hey, I have venture funding and I'm looking for a CTO. I mean, at what point do you really want to get involved in yet another project?
I think that honestly depends on the project itself. It could be a little bit farther down the line, but if it's sound, it's something we want to get involved with. If it's something behind the napkin, but a basic idea that we can understand very quickly, we can also get engaged in that point. I think it varies on the situation. I think it varies on the situation. It depends on what it is. I think ideally, from a developer's perspective, I want to be spec'd out, everything ready to go so I can build it. But I think it just varies on the idea.
I think it varies on the person. So if we've been friends for a really long time, I've seen you at events month after month, year after year, I kind of know what projects you're working on, and you say, hey, I've got this back of the napkin idea, you're wondering if you want to help me out on it. If we're friends, I'd be willing to do that. I think the less of a friendship relationship, the less of a previous established relationship we have, the more advanced I'm going to want to see that idea. So if you're a complete stranger and all the red flags are raging, but you have venture funding and you're going to pay me a salary to work on an idea, and I think the idea is okay, I'd be willing to consider joining up with that as well. So it's really about just building relationships so that you lower that bar required in order to convince that person to join you in that partnership.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, it really has to do with value add. What are all the parties bringing, and what's everybody, the relationship between all the parties. We've actually invested in napkin deals. We've actually been technology partners in napkin deals. But again, you have to ask yourself the question, what is it that the expectations are? What's the value proposition that you bring in all the other parties? And as you said, if you've got a napkin idea, but you've got $1 million in funding committed, that's going to make us look pretty interesting as to what it is. On the other hand, if you got this idea and you want us to invest $100,000 to get a prototype, now again, what is the expectation? If you've got a wireframe, you've mapped it out, and what you're really looking for is just somebody to write some code. There's some great outsourcing folks. There's people in this room right here that will code that up cheaply. There's Craigslist. There's a gazillion places. But if you're looking for a partner that's going to help you understand the market, understand the opportunity, what are the things that need to be done to make sure you have a competitive differentiation, and then execute on that strategy, that's a different set of relationships. So you just got to understand where you fit in all of that and what you're expecting from all the parties.
Right here in the front.
As a business person myself, I find it amazing to be exposed to all this technical brain power here that we have here tonight. What is very difficult for me, though, is to try to figure out how do I get to know you guys. It's a hit and miss, for instance, outside, socially, I may have talked to one or two of you, but not as many as I'd like to get to know, to eventually be able to say, yeah, I'd love to have you be a co-founder, a technical co-founder in my business. So what do you suggest? Are there specific groups or sites, practical way that we can really have a chance to have access to?
I think you're here. Refresh Miami is probably the best bet. I think a lot of it is people on the business side seem overwhelmed or intimidated by a lot of these things, but really the point of this is to connect people. So, and what Steve and Ed and all these guys were talking about was you have to come and start building relationships and talking to people and talk to as many people as you can. And you never know. You could start talking to Ed, and he might know exactly the right person that you need to talk to that would be perfect for your idea, and that person could also be in the room. So it's a matter of, you can't sort of hit and run, so to speak, like come show up one day and expect to get your future startup husband, so to speak. It has to be about building relationships. Well, I use husband just because anyways. So
it is like a marriage.
Right, it is. So from Naples.
When you're creating your team, when you're building a team of co-founders, in terms of equity, how does the equity get distributed? Is it something of equality, or is there something of inequality, and what determines those particular factors?
So again, it all becomes down to value add. There's a value that everybody brings together, and you try and quantify that and apply that to reality. Ultimately, again, if you've got the product, you've done the analysis, you understand what needs to be done, you've blueprinted it out, and you just need to hire a builder to build it, that's going to be a different relationship than if you bring somebody in that you're looking to invent or co-invent a solution with you, ultimately. Now, one of the challenges that we run into with tech partnership relationships is that you have this idea of but I want to sort of mitigate my liability, so I want milestones, I want milestone deliveries. And that's good and bad. I mean, that's a challenge because, again, if you've got the house blueprinted and you're just bringing in a contractor to do it, that's real easy. So when the first deck's done and when you put the roof on and blah blah blah, then you can earn up, vest in certain shares. But it's hard to do that with invention, and so you certainly can quantify elements, but it's really hard to say that if we're going to sit down together and we're going to invent this solution that's going to be this $100 million company. We don't know what that actual feature set is or the actual combination until we get further down that path. So they are unique in all of that. You want to try, from your end, when you're trying to bring in a technology partner, you certainly want to have them earn it up. But also the other side of that is that if this thing's successful, there's going to be plenty of pie to be distributed. Make sure you're comfortable, but make sure that the other people in the relationship are as well. And or 12%, whatever your choice.
Mark?
For a tech co-founder, I always recommend, like, tech guys are not good negotiators, and it's disappointing sometimes that in these what are essentially negotiations, that the tech guy, because he's not coming from a business negotiation background, ends up getting the short end of the stick. But the good tech guys are going to do a pretty simple mathematical evaluation. They're going to say, okay, what's your valuation? How much of that percent are you giving me? And then cut it in half or by a fourth, which is harsh, but fair, because as a tech guy, if I'm getting some percentage, there should be a vesting schedule for risk management reasons. Like, if it doesn't work out, you don't want me to walk away with like 10% of your company. But if there is a vesting schedule, then the idea of pay me now versus pay me later means that that isn't worth as much to me. But I think more importantly is that equity isn't a liquid asset. So the value to an investor, particularly if that investor is like your mom or friends and family, is a lot higher than the value of that same percentage to a tech co-founder. So the tech co-founder is going to say, okay, you're going to give me 1%. I'm going to take your last valuation, figure out what that 1% is, divide it in half or by a fourth, and then just add that to my compensation package. So you're either paying me or not paying me some amount of money, and then I add on the 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 that represents this equity, and then I decide for myself whether or not I want to work for that much. And I actually recommend to all of the tech guys to figure out a formula like that you're comfortable with, because if you get into a room with a business guy who's good at negotiating, you're just going to end up getting overwhelmed and lose.
So what happens when you add additional tech talent? So at the beginning, like, I'm a business person, so I'm looking for a co-founder in technology. What happens when you hire on person number 2, 3, 4 on the technology side? Because maybe that's the side that needs to grow up first, or say like the sales team or the marketing team grows up in terms of talent. Do you pay it out of, I guess, the original founder's budget, or would you negotiate to try to put a higher amount on the tech side, and then any talent that comes underneath the tech person is paid out of that, I guess, equity?
You could ask the person sitting immediately to your left, because he's in that boat right now. So.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
So I have a question for all of you. We're going to get kicked out of here at 10. So it's like a 9:40 maybe right now. So do you guys want to keep with questions, or do you want to break to the lobby, or go till 10 and then we all just head over to Shake Shack and continue the evening there?
I vote for one more question.
Mark's arm is tired. It's been up for 20 minutes. So anybody keep going till 10 and then we'll, all right. So Mark's question, since he's been patient.
Thank you. And you might not make a good negotiator, but you make a good salesperson. All the points on why people do business with other people, which really doesn't have a whole lot of product, or so how you like that person. Okay, so
Compliments are a good way to find a tech co-founder, by the way.
quick statement, and there's 3 questions. You can pick which one to answer. You talk about ideas, not anything without execution. Execution, obviously, you're going to need certain skills, tools, and knowledge to execute. You know, much like a coach might not have the skills, tools, and knowledge to be able to hit a fastball because he doesn't have the hand-eye coordination, but maybe he can coach it really well, but he can't execute. So you also mentioned that to launch soon and launch often. Question 1, would you say ask for money soon and ask for money often?
Well, you can ask.
Business plan. How much credibility do you give to a great, thought out, well-written business plan as opposed to just something on a napkin? And then, not for a whole blueprint, but maybe if you do have just a couple of do's, tips. You kind of mentioned what not to do in the beginning. Just curious to know if you have any do's for execution examples. For example, you might tell a guy that goes up to bat, hey, it starts with a good stance, and get your bat up. Those are some good points for execution. Are there any points that you guys can think of that would be a good do for execution for a startup company?
Wow. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I'll give you my initial comment on the what you're saying about the money thing. I mean, I think if you're on the company side, my view is, ask and ask often, and that way, you don't have to go for big amounts, and you can start to ratchet up your valuation. And that's the advice that I give most startup companies. It's a position that I've been in. I think investors would rather give you larger amounts, and because for them, sort of takes about the same amount of their time to manage a $50,000 investment as it does a $500,000 investment, that type of thing. But I'm when I'm on, putting my sort of entrepreneur hat on and starting startup companies, I want to keep asking for money regularly so that each time I can notch up that valuation and I end up with more of the pie at the end, or myself and my co-founders do. It is nice to be in a position where you have a lot of money, but you get beat up for taking a lot of money too soon.
The number one most important thing to me is a sound business, and the coming together of the idea and the execution strategy, all of the elements, having a real business. And that could mean a napkin, and then we sit in a conversation and we go, okay, I see how we do this, and if we put a couple $100,000 into development, we can build this product. Let's assume that that's going to happen. All right, so now what? How are we going to acquire our users? What's our cost of user acquisition? How are we going to keep them? How are we going to keep them engaged? How are we going to get them to tell 10 of their friends, to come by and all this stuff? How are we going to monetize those things? Because if you can't answer those questions, then I'd be curious to know what business model you do have, because it may be valid, but it's already got some red flags. Because if those answers can't be answered, or those questions can't be answered, or the answers aren't right, and these are things that you guys should be asking yourselves, because you don't want to waste your time either. So if you can't figure out how to monetize it and all of those things, that's a problem ultimately. And I'll say one more thing about raising money. I said it earlier, it's never been cheaper to have a startup. Well, there's another caveat to that, because it involves not ever having to deal with guys like us from the money side. And I'm not leaning on you, I'm pointing to Stuart over here. It's this radical idea called revenue generation.
Always good.
Revenue generation. What? Right, exactly. It is so easy
Making money
to
is a good business
generate
plan.
money. And by the way, that can catapult your business. I see so many startups focused on raising capital when they should just figure out how to raise or how to make money from their business. And then that'll really attract guys like us. Now, again, that doesn't mean that all startups, can do that. But don't ignore that. And if you've got a really great answer or an example of how you're doing this, even if it's early stage, that's going to be very interesting to us.
I think from the perspective of a tech co-founder, a red flag for me would be if after having a meeting with you, I have no idea what you do. Like I hear a lot of requests of you asking me to do this and can I do that, but at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, so what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And stuff like figuring out the cost of acquisition, the marketing, the legal paperwork, the accounting, all of these other things, it needs to be clear to me that you're capable of executing on that fundamental level. So to kind of rephrase your question, I'm assuming your question is kind of how do you demonstrate to other people that you're capable of executing it? So there's just the fundamentals of, if I'm writing code every day, that seems clear. What are you doing every day? But there's also aspects of the business plan. I mean, as a tech co-founder, I might not be the best person to judge the effectiveness of your business plan, but there's certain things that I can sense, like if it's too simple or too complicated or not well thought out, or your pitch isn't well practiced, so it makes me think that your business plan is potentially not as well practiced. And a lot of these things don't have to do with having a well-written, multi-page business plan. You can have a really fantastic business plan that's just a single page. And in fact, if you can break your business plan down to just an executive summary that's a single page, that's probably a good thing. That means that you've put a lot of thought into that particular idea. But trying to keep it as, not too hot, not too cold, not too small, not too complicated. Trying to find that sweet spot and practicing. So if you've pitched to a bunch of people and you've made your pitch better over time. Like at these kinds of events, coming out to these events, regardless of whether or not you're talking to a tech co-founder or some random drunk college kid that snuck in here for the free beer, practice your pitch and get some feedback and then make it better over and over again, because when the time comes that you actually do pitch to someone that is potentially a business partner, you will have gotten all of that junior league, minor league stuff out of the way, and you'll have a nice major league pitch that makes it sound like you're capable of executing something.
Chris, all the way in the back corner.
All right, so you've all come to this event, the Better Technical Co-founder, got together as Technical Co-founder. How do you ensure that if it goes sour, like a divorce is rather...
I think that's something you need to talk to a lawyer about. I mean, we're not here to dispense legal advice on that sense. I only pretend to be a lawyer on Halloween. So.
Fine print.
Right. How do you ensure that? Make sure you have contracts ahead of time and put clauses in for exit clauses and stuff like that. I mean, I can't really.
Yeah, you definitely got to put this into contracts and work this out. There's a lot of good lawyers in South Florida who can help you with that. If you don't know some of these people, all of us can probably give you names, but I mean, it's important. It's very important to do that. There's a lot of people in South Florida that will do that almost for free, to help out, young entrepreneurs and things like that, at least from the beginning, with the hopes that you're going to do business with them later on.
Yeah.
I can introduce you to half a dozen people that'll do that type of work for almost nothing.
There's at least 6 lawyers in this room right now. I know 3 of them or 4. So. And Miami has more lawyers per capita than anywhere else on earth.
Fortunately, most of them don't have jobs.
Wow. But Charles, you were going to say?
No, that if you're going to do the contracts, it's better to do it up front than later. It's much messier, much more expensive, much more, you lose more later down the line. So not only is it about getting on paper, getting on contract, but do it up front. It's worth the expense. It's worth maybe giving a little bit of equity away sometimes to just get that up front, done right.
It was mentioned the milestone vesting, that's another good way as opposed to just, time vesting of things. Milestone vesting is great.
The divorce does not have to be, ugly if you think about it up front and accommodate it in writing.
It's a prenuptial agreement.
Yeah, we want prenup.
Girl in the blue shirt over there. Sounds like a messy startup.
Exactly what I necessarily would want to get into without knowing the person's work ethic, not just the quality of work, but screwing
How much money you want to put up, right?
It's just a known thing that sometimes
money now or money later.
Be lazy or certain tasks might not be delivered on time, or things can get kind of loose, and other projects can come in and take up more time. So what would you say is a better choice for, are you looking more as a tech person in becoming a founding member, or do you also value actual projects for being paid your amount?
So that really depends on, what your need is. If you've already invented the solution and you've mapped it out and you've created a blueprint where now you can just hand it to somebody and say, here's what it looks like, here's what it needs to do, now give that back to me. Now that's a candidate for just hiring it out, or getting a partner, a tech partner that's going to be that focused on just that, and that's one type of a relationship. As opposed to, you've got an idea and what you need to do is you need to figure out how to make it the best in its market, and maybe you already have, but if you haven't, then what you're really looking for is a partner to co-invent this solution, and that's a different type of relationship. And I'm a big believer that you can absolutely outsource. And outsource has got nothing to do with India or offshore or nearshore or inshore or whatever. It's just having somebody else do all that. But you can't outsource invention or innovation. You can outsource execution of, here's the blueprint.
Yeah, I think the kind of basis of this entire presentation is there's an assumption underlying there that assumes you need a tech co-founder. And I think for a lot of people, they assume they need a tech co-founder when what they really need is to just raise enough money to pay a competent development shop, a freelance developer, to execute on a demo that you can then put in front of investors to go raise money. And at that point, you might need to worry about finding a tech co-founder. And there's lots of different options for outside of bringing someone in as a tech co-founder, as a business partner, that you can use. Some of them are really affordable too, if your idea is not that complicated to execute. So freelancers, onshore shops, offshore shops. A lot of times I've heard pitches from people who just need a project manager. So they might have a couple of single developers in China and Russia, but they just don't know what's going on, and they just need someone to coordinate that kind of stuff. So it might be a lot cheaper for you to find a project manager that's willing to work for a smaller amount of equity than someone who's a full-blown tech co-founder. Also just technical recruiters. So if you're having a hard time finding an individual to work with you on a contract basis, find someone who's good at finding cheap people to work with you on a contract basis, and you might be able to get really far in creating your MVP, your demo, your first version of your product without having to outlay 50% of your company to the first co-founder that comes along, the first tech co-founder that comes along.
I think they're avoiding one thing though. You have to actually have money to pay this person that you're not going to bring on as a co-founder or give equity to. So, that
I emphasize the affordable part of it.
Yeah, people need to eat. But I think one of the key issues underlying to what you're talking about is actually good communication. Because it seems like, and I'm just guessing here, that one of your big problems is you have different expectations than your previous partners have had. And so that wasn't communicated well early on, which leads to problems and leads to messy divorces, so to speak. And now, dude in red shirt, you had a question?
Question's kind of similar to hers, right? Is there a bad time or a good time to find a tech founder? Example, if you're already making close to $1 million in sales and I just want to find a tech founder, should I be hiring them or should I bring them on as a partner?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
If you're making $1 million in revenue,
How much is profit?
I guess how much is profit is also an interesting question. I'm assuming that some substantial portion of that is profit. It's really not worth it to you to give away a big chunk of your company in order to get a tech co-founder on board. Just pay the guy a salary.
Get a VP or someone to just manage that technology piece for you.
Right. I think if your problem is you have money and you don't know what to do with it, then you're in a class
we'll help
all
you with
on
that
your
problem.
own.
Yeah.
Right.
We have
if
a
your
bridge
problem is
for
you have a
sale.
startup and if you have a limited budget, you don't know how to spend that budget. I think that's the majority problem. But
I actually want to go back to your original question. I think you have to figure out, looking at your company, is the company a technology company, and is it going to be its core competency? If it's going to be its core competency, it's innovation based on technology. Typically, you would want to have that core competency in-house, right? You could get some money, build a prototype. Maybe it's a prototype that's not scalable, so you throw it away for the next one. But eventually, you will have to build that core competency in-house to even manage such a technology project. Because one thing is like, yeah, you make money and then you outsource it. But then you still need like a project manager or someone that can technically manage that. Who's going to architect your database? Who's going to architect your classes, your functions? Like,
Well, that's exactly one of the miscommunications that is happening from a business person, is understanding the difference between a developer and a web architect.
right.
And that's, saying I have this great idea, I have this vision of what I want this to look like, and then hiring a developer and telling them the vision, but not necessarily giving them the framework or how you want it to be done, the way that a web architect will put that together for you. And not every developer is an architect,
Right.
or they might not have that as a specialty, is what I'm
But I think that goes back to what we originally said, right? You're the business person. You're building a tech company. You should do a little bit of research to understand the technology side. And one of the things they teach you is planning, schemas, having a plan in place. So the milestones, they relate to technological deliverables. Hey, first week we want users and roles. Second week we want proper authentication. Like, those are things you can research and not have to know programming to know that there's these kind of deliverables in place. And then what you can do is that when you're meeting that potential or courting your tech guy or girl, is say, hey, how will you approach this? and hear what they say as far as approaching the thing. Hey, I'll just script something up together. Okay, that's a red flag. But hey, you know what? I want to take a step back and actually break down the users. I want to break down the objects. I want to break down a couple things. Then you see, hey, they're taking the problem from a high level, and they're starting to break down the pieces and really understand it. So that's a good indicator to say, hey, this guy may be a good fit for me.
You know, there's also very little barrier to entry now to learning basic programming. There's tons of repositories in Google, you know, so if you if you're on the business side and you can't find someone, learn on your own. You know, Code School and all these other things are out there, which are pretty easy to learn, just the basics. You don't have to become a professional who can architect a multi-billion hit a day website, but if you want to build something basic that makes it easier for you to sort of express your idea, to just dedicate a couple hours a day for a few months. And
two quick points. The first is that I think startups worry way too much about architecture early on.
Right.
You should work under the assumption that the first version of your site is going to end up in the trash as soon as you start getting some traction. So just at a certain point early on, sometimes you just need that developer to get the thing running in some form so that you can put it in front of people and find out whether or not it works. And that's going to save you a lot of money. The second quick point is that, and I think I lost it.
I don't know. So we have time for the last statement from Mark, because it's 10.
I think something I'd like to hear about is having to do with patents. So as a startup, when is it a viable option? When do you find that it's a cost-effective option for building version 1 and version 2? All right, you have this functionality, you should go after patent this. In version 1, version 2, it's completely thrown out and useless and wasted 40 years of training way after patent. You guys can touch on some of your experience with that.
I think you validate it quickly. So, for example, if you're building a prototype to throw it away, you're probably holding off on that patent because, and it depends on what the patent is. I think it's difficult to patent software per se. Maybe perhaps copywriting is probably the better route to copyright your code. But patenting maybe a process, that's something you can patent right away and not necessarily have a prototype in place, for example. Or if you build a product that you think is a product that you're going to continue to use and iterate on top of and grow and expand on, then that's when you basically made that decision, that's when you can start considering, I guess, to patent it per se. I think you have to talk to a lawyer for that specifically, but I mean, I guess that's the points I'll start looking at before I start considering that kind of option.
I think from my experience and stuff that I'm involved in, I mean, we're continuously filing provisional patents, and these are cheap and easy to do. And if they go, you know, if you don't need it, you don't need it. It's when you get to that next step, you know, and things are more serious, and you start looking at, you know, more filing of a utility patent stuff. That's when you start spending real money. But I mean, I think a lot of people can put together very simple provisional patents on their own with almost no help from a lawyer, and file it themselves for very cheap.
You could spend a lot of money on getting a lawyer and getting a patent, or you can spend a lot of money getting developers who create the best implementation of that idea. And I would recommend not worrying so much about protecting the idea and then having to pay lawyers to enforce that protection in the future, and rather paying to be the best execution of that idea in the world. Because no one can ever take that away from you unless you're just bad at your business and it shouldn't exist in the first place.
All right, so. Oh, you got. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, I have to say something about that. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, being somebody who has patents, but also sits as a member of Open Web Foundation, which is an anti-patent group, and considering where we are in this country with you know, the desperate need for patent reform and some of the crazy reforms that they're trying to impose on us right now, it's kind of a mixed bag with all this. Now, I couldn't agree more with the idea of, guess what? Technology is moving. And if you're good at what you do, if you get your space, try and keep up with me. I'm going to go forward. But it is that double-edged thing, because as investors, we love to see patents. You know?
Right.
One of the interesting things that comes from the exercise is, you know, no one cares about patents in terms of litigation when you're not successful. But ask Samsung, when you get successful, everybody cares at that point. And one of the exercises that comes out of, one of the things that comes out of that process of patents is the concept of prior art. Are you going down a rabbit hole that is guaranteed to get you sued? And that's one of the things to consider. Do not allocate 50% of your capital as a startup for patents. Focus on the product.
Right.
If you happen to have the money lying around and it's a tiny piece, then
Your last thing.
Thank you. James Carvin and my co-founder, Lisa Carvin. We've been working on an idea for about 14 years in Burgos
Jesus.
Hour. And we probably laid out about 10 milestones for our original developers because we finally saved up enough money to finally get the thing started. And prior to that, we were in a kind of loop where we had the idea, but we didn't have the programmers and the leadership and to attract the money, and then we couldn't get the leadership without the money, and so then it was all about communicating the idea, which was really hard because it was somewhat complex, and we really didn't know where to start. So after 10 years figuring out how to articulate the idea, maybe I got there. But, and so we'll always be working on that. But the question is about the transferability of the code once we got some developers, which we outsourced just to build a prototype. I'm wondering how good really are developers at putting in the comments, and I know I'll do the reading up on the source code and try to understand that a little bit better. But I know that I'm going to be going in-house as soon as we get done with this third-party group, and I'm trying to figure out at what stage I need to be transitioning that, and then what to tell the applicants for the. Well, now I guess we'll have to have a threesome on the co-founder thing with the co-founding technology officer.
TMI.
that's a perk.
But that's what it amounts to. Is exactly what stage do you go in-house with that? And I mean, I really, the first thing I did was I went to the New Tech community, which was the North Branch. We came from Palm Beach Gardens, which I don't think that's farther than Naples, but
Mark Lehman. Yeah.
But it was worth the ride, and I-95 was a smooth trip. But we really want to know exactly how we're going to transition from a group that was recommended through this community to us. We went looking, well, okay, we don't know where to start. And if somebody said something about a tech stack, that's kind of like lingo that I wasn't used to. But I'll look up a term that I don't know easily enough. But I just need to, and I know I have plenty of experience with what I'm trying to do, but I have to somehow interface with who's going to execute this idea the best way, and at what stage I go from milestones. I gave you 2 of the 10 milestones. So you work on this, and then we'll take it from there. But I just want to know what they're going to leave me after that, if it's going to have any value.
Okay.
Charles, Ed.
I think part of the question that I'm grabbing from that is whether or not you should interview developers under the expectation that they're comfortable with taking on code that someone else has written, which I don't think any good developer has a problem with. And in fact, if you're, it's actually a well-tread path to start with some sort of contractor or offshore shop, and then eventually reach a point where you need someone to be working in-house on your project. So that's not going to be something that's a deterrent to a person that's a capable developer and interested in being a tech co-founder. And I think the point that I want to stress to you, which was the second point that I forgot from earlier, is that if you learn a little bit of code, just concepts like loops and if and thens and stuff like that, you're able to express to the people that you want to bring on as tech co-founders what you want in their language. A good example was I had a vice president at a music startup that I worked on before, where the CEO would come in and say, I want this, I want that, I want this, and throw out these like high-level marketing speak things. And then he would leave, and the VP would come up and say, so what he's basically saying that if this, then do that, otherwise do this, then that, loop over these items and do this. And that was it was funny to hear it, but he was making an attempt to speak my language because he made an attempt to learn some really fundamental concepts of programming. So if you take your ability to express yourself in a way that developers understand, plus a developer is not going to be afraid of taking on someone else's code, you should be in a pretty good position to be able to pick someone to take on your project.
All right.
In my experience, or in the stuff that we've done, and it kind of plays into what Ed's saying. Like I said, we build a lot of prototypes and MVPs, and then typically there are most situations where we pass it on to the in-house team because they've won the funding, they're good to go, and they're moving along. So there's indicators now that you can ask for which relate to researching and learning about this kind of stuff in the tech side, which are typical things like, hey, not only do you comment the code, but do you use SVN by any chance? Do you use any code repositories, for example? Do you store the code? Do you iterate on top of it? What's your ticketing system? What's it like? How do you organize your tickets? Even things like that, to just figure out what kind of organization they have in place is a great way to do it. With bigger companies, they like to do like third-party code audits, for example. You don't have to get into that, but there's that option as well. If you want to kind of like start to, I'm trying to give you real details instead of like kind of broad stuff. And we go through that route. Also, just talking to them, if they're comfortable opening up and being transparent, because that's a huge thing for us. For everyone we work with, we try to be as transparent as possible. We've adopted like the pivotal process from San Fran. And what happens is that most of our product champions, is what we call them, they're in our ticketing system. Like they're inside, they're seeing everything that's happening, they're seeing the tickets being accepted and requested and forwarded on. So they're involved and know that it's organized enough to take it from there. So I think maybe you should look at your current outsourcing solution and say, hey, can I get this kind of details? Can I see these kind of things to put me in a more comfortable spot? And then when you start talking to new developers, you see, hey, you know, everything's going great. I think I can adopt it. I think he's right. If you find a good, capable developer, they typically can work with anything because they're that versatile. They know the syntax. They know what's going on. They probably even see the mistakes that they made and fix the mistakes, or even work with them. You never know. So I think that those are details that you can ask for, look around, do a little bit of research, and kind of ask for.
And on that note, we are done, guys. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to all our sponsors and to the guys at Cohilo for helping put this together. So let's all head over to Shake Shack across the street. You guys know where that is? On the other side of US 1. They have beer, burgers, shakes. And that's it. Thanks again, guys, for coming down. Yeah, excellent job.